Absolute Batman just keeps getting better and better. And Absolute Poison Ivy, I don't think I've ever loved the character of Pamela Isley more than I love her in this story, outside of Batman the Animated Series. So, what this does is this opens up with the fight between Batman and Poison Ivy. And one of the things to keep in mind here that we actually learned in the last video is there's a few things at play. Number one, there were cops in here, and they were using an augmented mobile ultrasonic cannon, essentially a sound cannon that could break apart cells. But of course, these cops were transmogrified by Poison Ivy and turned into agents for her, essentially. The other thing she was able to do is grow versions of herself, but she's a lot more powerful than we're traditionally used to. And so that's what she tells Batman, right? Do not fight. There is no point. Now, of course, Batman's also talking to Alfred at the same time. He's got him in his ears, right? And Alfred says, the density of the spores up there, if that cowl comes off, you will have moments before you're compromised. Your genetics will be hers to reshape. And that's where Batman just says, then it won't come off. Now, we saw that in the last video. And in fact, you guys pointed out something that I got wrong. I thought he took his mask off. It actually turns out it was yanked off of his face. That was essentially what happened in that moment, which is why he rewrapped his face with his cowl. It's the only thing protecting him. Because keep in mind that with these kind of spores that Poison Ivy has emitting in this location, it will rewrite his DNA, and then she will be able to control it. Now, this is a complete and total reference to the idea of the green in DC Comics. For those of you guys who don't know what that means, the green is an amazing concept. Traditionally, it's associated with Swamp Thing, and only in the last, decade, maybe decade and a half, did it get rolled over into Poison Ivy. But the idea is that where Swamp Thing basically works for the Parliament of Trees and is able to tap into the green, so effectively all living plant matter that exists in the world, Poison Ivy is able to do the same thing. But what Scott Snyder's doing is taking that concept and then reworking it and simply saying, so long as she's able to infect you with her spores, she can do whatever she wants to with your DNA, control you on the genetic level, which is kind of horrifying when you think about it. But Batman, in this whole time that he's talking to Alfred, just says, find me a weakness. And Alfred, of course, is watching this to a degree and warning him of various attacks that are coming and so on and so forth. But all Batman wants here is a way to overcome Poison Ivy, because all that's happening in the here and now is this essentially a war of attrition. That is Poison Ivy just constantly spawning, right, these versions of herself and just fighting Batman to the point that he eventually gets worn down. He'll be exhausted and he won't be able to fight anymore. It's how war of attritions work. Just an overwhelming force taking you to the point that you just can't fight any longer. And so that's where Batman says, right, she's made of plant matter, animal matter, insect, bacteria. Which part has a vulnerability? And Alfred just says, I am looking, kid, but if there is a soft spot to her, I am not seeing it. And that's when we get to this origin portion of her, how Poison Ivy actually became Poison Ivy. And that's a crazy thing here, is because what we end up doing is jumping back to after the fire. Now, there's a little bit of a refresh here, right? The idea was that in the last video that we did, the last comic that came out, issue number 17, that Pamela Isley had basically been working on trying to find a way to grow new human cells using a variety of plant matter, bacteria, insect DNA, the whole nine yards. And where initially all of this was geared towards finding a way to cure her mother of what was effectively cancer, that once it got to the point where she started to realize that the powers that be wanted to take her research and weaponize it for their own purposes, she chose to walk away and focus on the research by herself. But that's when she goes to grab it, a chemical fire breaks out, and she burns to death. And so that's where you pick up with this conversation with her mom. And that's where Poison Ivy says, this is all that's left of her. That's what the doctors tell my mother. The chemical fire in the lab reached nearly 9,000 degrees, as hot as a young star. It's a miracle that anything at all survived, they say. And yet my heart appears perfectly intact. My mother asks if it's alive. They tell her no, but that's not true. I want to scream to her that I'm more alive inside this container than I've ever been, connected to primal forces that I do not understand yet, but can feel as colors, green and red and black. Now, this, to me, looks like a reference to Absolute Green Lantern. Right now, we don't know how far-reaching Al Ewing's Green Lantern goes. We don't know if the emotional spectrum exists in the traditional way. It doesn't look like it does, but these are a handful of the colors that we've seen in the Absolute Green Lantern line. But that's where she continues on. My mother turns to go, and in that moment, I hate the glass separating us more than I've ever hated anything. But not just the glass, the powerful men who put it there, the men who did this to me, all because I wanted to go further in my research to do more. But this is what they do. Those men, my enemies, our enemies, they put walls everywhere, walls of every kind, dividing us from each other, from nature, from truth, dividing up everything, all for profit, their own tiny private kingdom. And that's one of the biggest kickers about Absolute Batman. The story of Absolute Batman is very much a reflection of how the real world works, right? Powerful people dividing up the world for their own ends. Now, of course, within the context of this story, we're talking about Absolute Joker, Absolute Ra's al Ghul, effectively the Absolute Justice League, the most powerful people in the world who have kind of carved out sections of it for themselves. It's one of the tales as old as time when it comes to the Batman mythos, but it also reflects back on a lot of landmark stories that have existed over the years. Batman No Man's Land, Old Man Logan, and even what's recently been happening in Ultimate Spider-Man, right? The Illuminati carving up the world for their own individual rule. That's kind of what's going on here. And it's really cool to see these elements rolling over from different stories. And so that's where Poison Ivy continues on. I will get out. I will find a way. Ivy climbs the highest walls. As my mother walks away, I reach for her. I can sense the black creeping through her. She will die this afternoon, sitting on a bench, waiting for the bus back to the hospice. No one will notice for almost 3 days. When the morgue thaws her out, part of her will fall off, her fingers, her breasts, her nose, like rotted fruit. But now, in this moment, I reach and reach with everything I have, and suddenly something new grows, something that cannot be hurt anymore. Now, here's the interesting thing about all of this. Right? Here's the interesting thing about it all. We can kind of take this from two different perspectives, and depending on how you want to look at it, one of them is really, really cool. The other one kind of makes a lot more sense. Most likely, and what's definitively happening here, is she's telling this story in hindsight, right? She's literally giving us a flashback, but a part of me kind of wants to believe that we are flashing back to her, and we're experiencing this moment as it happens, and the way she's talking is in the present. And so when she makes statements like, this is how my mother is going to die, no one's going to notice her, it almost gives this kind of precognitive feel. Now, I just want to believe that's the case, truth to tell, because the idea of her constantly referencing the black, right, referencing the Green Lantern mythos, it almost gives this idea that there's a kind of precognitive force that can be harnessed when it comes to Absolute Green Lantern. And you can kind of roll that over into this and explain that that's the case. Again, that's almost not at all what's happening here. She's just telling the story in hindsight. But I would like to believe that the other explanation is true. Right? I think it would just kind of be fun, truth to tell. But the fact is, right, jumping back to the here and now, the fight between Poison Ivy and Batman, Poison Ivy just says, "Why are you fighting me, Batman? We are on the same side." And Batman just calls for Pennyworth. And that's where Poison Ivy tells him, he's not here anymore. I'm afraid rare forms of bacteria can disrupt radio signals, as can some bird calls, and even dolphin songs, all of which I am emitting as we speak. No weaknesses, just strengths. You can be so much more too. You're halfway there. You just need to embrace it. So the idea that Absolute Poison Ivy is not just plant matter, right? She's a combination of virtually every form of life that exists on the planet in some fashion or another, I think makes her more dangerous than she's ever been in DC Comics. But then at that point, we switch away from Poison Ivy and we jump to the character of Martha. Now, keep in mind, at the end of the last video, we learned that Martha was part of the Court of Owls. We'll talk more about them here in a second because you guys called it. You guys called something very important with the Court of Owls. So what ends up happening is that as she's walking along, right, the plane basically having run out of fuel and just making her way through New Mexico, she calls Bruce and she just says, "Bruce, it's Mom, honey. I'm not sure if this message will go through, but I'm going to be out of town for a bit. There are some things that I need to take care of. Just know that you will always be my little boy, and I love you, and don't ever change for anyone." And then of course the call ends up cutting out. But that's when this vehicle comes flying out of nowhere. And when these two owls come out, they run off the Court of Owls nursery rhyme. And it's basically a way to kind of test whether or not you are a member of the court or have ever been a member of a court, right? We watch you at your hearth. We watch you in your bed. Speak not a whispered word of us, or we'll send the talon for your head. Now, the full nursery rhyme is amazing, right? Beware the Court of Owls that watches all the time, ruling Gotham from a shadowy perch behind granite and lime. They watch you at your hearth, they watch you in your bed. Speak not a whispered word of them, or they'll send the talon for your head. I love the Court of Owls in DC Comics. For those of you guys who don't know what the Court of Owls is, let me know, and we can remaster the New 52 Batman Court of Owls story, because it is amazing. It's so amazing. It's so incredibly phenomenal, right? It's one of the best things ever. We already have it, right? So I'll post a link down to it, but we can also remaster it because honestly, our video style has changed over the years. But the bigger point is that they basically black bag Martha. Now, of course, they throw a red sack over her head. This is clearly a reference to the Red Hood, but it's cool nonetheless, because once she's in the car, they whisk her away. And so once they bring her back to their base of operations, they tell her, you knew the rules about communication and the consequences for breaking them. So why would you communicate with us, Martha? And she just says, because something is happening in Gotham right now, something that I believed was worth the risk. And one of the owls tells her, right, that's not your decision to make. You put us all in danger by reaching out. And another one just asks, what gives you the right? This is how we've survived, just because you were one of us. And Martha says, no, right? And this is where you guys were right. She says, I wasn't just one of you. I was a Talon, the best Talon. You all know what I did for the court. That's what gives me the right. And maybe surviving was enough before, but the truth is, Batman changed that. And that's where she's told, then you can blame Batman for what's about to happen. So yeah, you guys called it in the comments section of the last video. You guys were like, I bet Martha was the Talon for the Court of Owls. There were so many people who called it. There were so many people who called it. Just like a lot of you guys were saying that in Matt Fraction's Batman run, Dr. Zeller is actually Punchline. I don't know if that's true. I think it's a dope theory. I think it's an amazing theory, but I don't know how true it is. But the point is, right, jumping back to the fight between Batman and Poison Ivy, Batman starts experiencing these memories. At least that's the way that it's perceived here. Because the first scene that we get is Batman going down into the sewers where Waylon Jones is. Now, lest we forget, in issue number 16, I think it was, Batman and Absolute Wonder Woman ended up traveling to the realm of gods in order for Batman to attain an arrow that could be used by Waylon Jones to turn him back into his human self, even if only temporarily, and it would seemingly grant him the ability to shapeshift back and forth between his normal human self and his crocodile version. But it's also the journal entries that Batman creates here, right, where Bruce says, do not accept it, do not let yourself go there. That sound, the roar you keep hearing, echoing deep in the tunnels, it's him changing back, not becoming something worse. Because one of the things that he thought was happening down in the sewers when he went back to visit Waylon after initially leaving the arrow for him is he thought Waylon was transforming into something darker than he was before, right? Becoming like a bigger, more grotesque version of himself. But the inverse, the opposite of what he intended had happened. He didn't know. And that's why he's telling himself that. Do not let yourself go down the path of thinking that Waylon has become something worse. The other part is the Iceberg Lounge, right? Where Oswald hangs out at. Every time Bruce goes there to try to talk to him, Oswald doesn't want to have anything to do with him. So much so, he's actually hired henchmen to beat the tar out of Bruce every time he shows up. Keeping in mind that from Bruce's friend's perspective, he brought all of this on their heads when he invoked Absolute Bane. And Absolute Bane started tearing his friends apart, physically destroying them, crushing them in some way, basically turning their lives upside down and inside out. Edward Nygma won't answer the door whenever he goes to visit him. Harvey Dent has actually been cut loose from his job, that when Bruce shows up there to the law offices of Harvey, there's just one of the guys who's cleaning off, right, the words on the door. And he says, look, all I heard is that hanging out with the Batman has people looking at Dent differently, and all the folks that he put away too. So now people are second guessing whether or not he did it legally. So he's called his entire career into question, which he has essentially lost, right? It picks up with his own journal entry when his mom had left him that message. And he says, I got a message from mom yesterday. I keep opening it, then hanging up before it starts. Deep down, I know I'm just saving it for when I need to hear it most. But what in the heck is happening to me? And so that's when you jump back to the fight between himself and Poison Ivy. And that's what makes things so wild, because Poison Ivy seemingly has some measure of telepathy here. Either that, or it's just her ability to observe everything that's happening in the city. The second explanation tends to be the most accurate one, and you'll see why I say that here in a second, because she tells him, I'll take it all away, Batman, that soft part, the pain. We are becoming one, you and me. I can feel how much you are hurting, your mother, your friends. And where Batman tells her, right, get out of my head, she says, no, join me, be my knight. Together, we can beat them. And then she fires plant rockets out of her hand, which is amazing. That's one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Batman cuts him in half with the chainsaws that he has on his arms, because apparently Batman became Chainsaw Man. But she keeps on talking, right? She says, look at you, right? Spines that stab like a cola cactus, wings that slash like an ostrich, the will of a virus. Just breathe me in, and you can become something better. And seemingly he rejects it, and she says, the stubbornness of a cockroach, then I will drag you into the light, one way or another. And so she says, this city is an ecosystem, a living thing. You introduced something new, something foreign, and now the city is reacting. But instead of going further, you try to hold it back. Even now, looking for that weapon, the screaming gun behind you, like the ones they use in that place to separate my cells. Stop denying what you want. You wished to reshape things, just like I did. You blew the seeds across the city, but now you're afraid of what you've sown. Well, change is coming, whether you like it or not. Now, there's two things to pick up here. Number one, again, that second explanation seems to be the accurate one. The very nature of Poison Ivy is that she's basically tied into plant life around the city. So she sees and hears everything. Everything that Bruce Wayne has experienced, everything that Bruce Wayne has seen. She's heard it in some way. And in fact, she goes a little deeper into that here in a minute. But the second thing is what happens in a conversation between Alfred Pennyworth and his handlers. Because Alfred is told, there's been a shift in plans, Agent Pennyworth, your new assignment. And that's where Alfred just says, I am looking at the bloody assignment, but why? Right? I've been on Grimm for over 5 years, and now he's here in Gotham, and now you want to assign me someone else. And he's told, yes, we want you on Batman. That is the new target. And Alfred just asks, and if I refuse, and he's told, then let's just say, no more enjoying a mere sweet tea. But in that moment, Harley shows up here, right? The leader of the Red Hood gang. And Alfred asks the question, right? Like, what are you doing here? And she just says, I am here to help with this whole Batman thing. We all are, right? You have Dick Grayson, who just says, okay, tomorrow you do something about him. So again, Scott Snyder has been slowly teasing the introduction of Dick Grayson in the Absolute Batman line. The biggest question everyone has here is he going to become Robin, or is he going to become his own character like Nightwing? No one knows the answer to that question, right? But then we continue on with Bruce, right, where he's like leaving the construction yard, and some of the guys are like, oh, you know, come on, Bruce, we're trying that new Batman-themed bar on 39th, right? Great big wings. And Bruce just kind of says, I smile, tell them another time, I hope they cannot see my fists shaking. I look at the sidewalk, they're 200 years old. But then that's when you jump back to his conversation with Poison Ivy. And then we start kind of doing this back and forth between Bruce and Poison Ivy in terms of Bruce's life himself, how he sees the world around him, and what Poison Ivy tells him. Because Poison Ivy says, you can walk around with your head down, blind to it, writing in your little book, but it is happening, and they see it. Believe me, the ones whose plans you disrupted, the ones who hate change, the worst of them is here. Of course, Absolute Joker. And she says their leader, their horned king, looking down and smiling from somewhere high above us both. And she says the tricks he plays, the deals and pacts and bargains, carving up the world with his minions. We have to stop him. I didn't think he could be stopped all those years that he kept me locked away, scrambled by the noise guns, and pulled apart. But then one day, there you were, like some wild beast running naked through my biome. And I knew if I had the chance, I would join with you, because Grimm, he's coming for you, just like he came for me, just like he comes for anything that threatens change, isolates it, locks it away. He's making moves as we speak, and I can feel it. And she says, maybe if you were willing to evolve on your own, to become what's needed, you might be able to stop him, Batman, but you are not. And she says, don't worry though, when I release these spores from this place, I will make you something new. I will make everyone new. We will be strong, beautiful, a new kingdom, and together we will stop him, and then we will make that first wish come true. Now, this is kind of a crazy scenario here, because what Poison Ivy is advocating for and what she's arguing for is that there are some individuals out there who are so terrible, the only way to beat them is to become as bad as them. But that kind of flies in the face of the nature of Batman, right? In fact, that's Batman's whole shtick. Batman doesn't kill. And if you like the idea of the memes, he says he cherishes his no-killing rule. He doesn't care how many men, women, and children have to die in order for him to keep it. But the point is, there is such a thing as falling down to a point of no return. Now, there are certainly some villains where, I mean, look, if you kill them, you know, it's not a big deal. The Joker's an example of that, right? The Joker's just cannot be fixed, cannot be saved, right? Argument after argument says the Joker's gotta go. But if we're talking about just trying to fix the city of Gotham and the people within it, right, and individuals out there who are nothing more than just power-hungry, crazy people, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to kill them. Absolute Superman's a perfect example of that, right? With the whole situation involving Ra's al Ghul, Absolute Superman could have killed him. And in fact, he considered the idea of doing it, but instead he handed him over to the authorities. He was basically held prisoner out in Pakistan, I think it is, and then Absolute Superman started showing up with letters written by people who had lived under the rule of Ra's, and then in reading those letters to Ra's, basically began to change him as a person. Now, ultimately, he's going back, so maybe there is some irredeemable aspect of his character, but that story's not done, so we don't know how far that tale's going to go. The point is, people can be fixed, and that's the nature of Batman. That's what Batman believes. But this is also the absolute universe. Things are different here. And so what ends up happening is that where Bruce is making his way through the city of Gotham, he ends up coming across Jim Gordon. Now keep in mind, Bruce knows that Jim Gordon and his mom are touching naughty bits. They tried to hide it from him, right, because they just kind of felt like he wasn't ready for that kind of reality, but that's where Jim confronts him, right, and he says, I need to talk to you, right? And Bruce just says, no offense, but the last thing that I want to talk to you about is you and mom. And that's where Jim's just like, it's not about your mom, right? She's a grown woman, I'm a grown man, and nature is nature. But this is about you, Bruce. And Bruce is just kind of like, why is it about me? And Alfred just says, Bruce, I know. And Bruce is just kind of like, what are you talking about? And Alfred just looks at him. And Bruce is like, oh. And I was so excited at the idea that Jim Gordon knows Bruce Wayne as Batman. The real question is, how long has he known? Now, Bruce doesn't ask that directly. He's just like, how did you know? He doesn't really ask how long he's known. But, I mean, honestly, Jim Gordon's a detective. It wasn't that hard to figure out. He's like, you're 6'9" and 400 pounds. That does not exactly blend in. And I did pull you out from a pile of bats one time. So, yeah, I figured out pretty fast that you are Batman. And so Bruce is like, does mom know? And Alfred's just kind of like, believe it or not, I don't think so, right? Her brain is engaged in some Olympic level gymnastics to avoid the obvious, self-defense, I suppose. And so he asks, right, are you here to tell me to stop? And Jim Gordon asks him, do you want me to? And Bruce just says right now, I don't know. And he says, he's getting so big, Mr. Gordon. I wanted Batman to affect the city, to shine a light on things, but I didn't expect this. And that's where Jim just says, you didn't expect him to become the light himself, the big old beacon in the sky. Now, this is a very important thing because Bruce says, the things I'm up against, it feels like to win, I have to become something tougher, meaner. And that's where Jim is like, something darker. But here's an important thing to understand here, right? Within the city of Gotham, and by extension, the rest of the world, so much of it is ruled by powerful, corrupt people. And so the average person feels so incredibly helpless. They feel like there's nothing they can do to solve the problems within the world around them. But then suddenly Batman comes along. And that's why we said during that original story, when he faced off against Absolute Bane, that it was both a literal and metaphorical David versus Goliath, especially when Bane grew to what was it, like 50 feet tall and probably like 1,200 pounds or 3,000 pounds or something, when he was just gigantic, right? Bane represents, quote unquote, the powers that be, an unstoppable force. In this instance, Bane was tangible. And so for a lot of people out there watching that televised fight, Batman defeating Bane was, on a metaphorical level, them cheering for Batman and them indirectly defeating the powers that be. Batman became their champion. He became the person that stood up for them in a way that they could not stand up for themselves. Why does that matter? Because now he's bigger than just a man. Now he's more than just one guy. It's the story of Batman, right? Batman is now a concept, an idea. He's a thing that people believe in. And when that happens, in times of desperation, people will take symbols and rise them up and then want that symbol to become the thing that can save them. And that's where Bruce is right now. Bruce is struggling with this idea that all he wanted was for Batman to be an example of what people could do, not necessarily becoming vigilantes, but to show you can fight back and you can fight back in your own way. I won't necessarily go so far as to say that the people of Gotham were cowards, but I will go so far as to say he became a big symbol and people rallied around it. And now he doesn't know how to handle it. And so that's where Jim Gordon tells him, I have no real advice for you, but I will give you the advice that someone else gave me when I was in a similar situation to yours. Someone much smarter than me. It was advice given to him by his daughter, Barbara Gordon. And that's where, with Batman being held captive by Poison Ivy, Barbara Gordon shows back up again. Keep in mind, she was originally here. And then Bruce was like, you can't be here. And just like threw her off down into like all the sewer water and everything. So she was kind of pissed, to be honest with you. But Batman was also trying to save her life, right? But she says, you can thank me by swearing never to pull that kind of crap again. Now, SWAT is about to bust in with a dozen double augmented ultrasonic cannons. So we need to get out of here before she figures out what's going on. And so that's where Batman says, the spores are the main threat here. It's effectively the bomb that we need to neutralize if and when we decide to neutralize her. That's the primary problem. And so what ends up happening is Batman takes the ultrasonic cannon and fires it on Poison Ivy. And she asks, right, do you really think that sound gun can destroy me? But Batman says, no, but it shows me what I suspected. When you bonded with me earlier, I saw Dr. Isley. You want me to evolve, but you have not gone all the way yourself. And he says, your heart, the last piece of your human self, you kept it, the only part of you that was not remade. I can see it right there. Destroy the spores, or I will destroy your heart. The sonic waves will disperse the cells. You could regrow it, but it will not be that one, the one that your mother held. It holds a special place for you. And so that's when you jump back to this momentary bit of advice that Jim Gordon had given to Bruce. And Jim Gordon says, when I became mayor, I was terrified, Bruce. I had my plan, my agenda, but suddenly the whole city was looking to me to do so much more, to be more. And the critics, they kept attacking me for being too soft, too local, too much of a people person. I was all torn up. Maybe to be a good mayor, I had to forget all the hippy-dippy stuff that your dad and mom and I loved and become something tougher, colder, and meaner. One night, Barbara, who was 16 at the time, she found me on the balcony in my robe, staring out at the city, and she said something to me. And so then you switch back to Batman, and he responds directly to Poison Ivy. He says, Ivy does climb, but it also clings. It holds on, Dr. Isley. You do not want to lose that last piece of yourself, do you? And that's where Jim Gordon utters the advice that was given to him by Barbara. And he says, a tree grows tallest when you care for its roots. And so seemingly what Jim Gordon is telling him here is you need to focus on the people first. They look to you as a symbol for a reason. You need to embrace that and understand that now Batman is bigger than a man. Batman represents something. He represents the idea that people can be saved. So now you are beholden to the people, and there is no escaping that, which is not a bad thing. In fact, that's a great thing. And so that's when you switch back to Batman, who's still got this ultrasonic cannon and just says, destroy the spores, Dr. Isley, now. Because the heart she holds that was held by her mother means more than the spores and changing the city of Gotham. And so that's where Jim Gordon leaves some parting words for Bruce and says, you have good roots, son. I know that you will make the right choice when the time comes. And so that's when these spores are destroyed. Poison Ivy tells Bruce, we could have saved everyone. Everything climbed so high, made it better. You've only doomed yourself. You are just small and terrestrial and weak and human. And that's where Batman just says, yes, I have been, but not anymore. And he literally turns on the cannon to full power and fires it on Poison Ivy and blows her heart apart. And that's where Barbara just says, SWAT is here, right? We have to get out of here right now. And they bail out. Now, it doesn't kill Poison Ivy. Again, she can regrow her heart, but she just says, I will kill you, Batman, right? And just kind of defines him and labels him as a monster. And so in that moment, Barbara asks the question, right? She says, what happened back there, right? You destroyed her heart anyway. And Batman just says, she said to fight what's coming, I needed to evolve. I just took her advice. Maybe we all should. Not only that, right? You jump back to Martha and her conversation with the court, right? And the owls say, like, I am sorry, Martha. We really hoped you would listen to reason. And Martha just says that I'm happy to disappoint you because I always believed that we owls were never supposed to listen to reason. And where they tell her, right? Like, that's enough. She says, no, right? It is not. We stood for something once. We were the ones who fought back from the shadows against the rich and the powerful. So the owls were good guys here. They weren't bad guys like in the main DC universe. And she says, we were warriors fighting for a better world, proud, wise, vicious owls. And yes, they crushed us. He crushed us, referring to seemingly absolute Joker. So now maybe we need to be something new, but not by hiding or by changing who we are at our core. It's if that's what we are about, then you might as well pull the trigger. And so the idea of Martha and the court basically being freedom fighters is huge because the final little tidbit that we get here, right? We get all these instances, right? A delivery driver goes to drop off a package to Oswald. Nigma realizes Batman's not knocking on the door. And then you get Killer Croc, right? Waylon Jones, who's reverted back into his human form. And he just asks, right? Bruce, are you there? And Bruce isn't there, right? Bruce has seemingly left them behind. And that's where you pick up on a rooftop where he hears the voice message from his mom, where it just says, Bruce, it's mom, honey. And he just deletes the message on the spot. So seemingly, he's becoming the darker version of himself, which really asks the question, how much more brutal can he get? But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, drop a like. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.